And it really is them, the Astros, the Yankees, and the Dodgers. Those are far and away the 4 best teams in baseball. I don't really think there's any other claim any other team can make.
That's fair. John.
Yes.
The Tigers.
To go in entirely the opposite direction.
Well, they're playing okay. 10-3 as of yesterday, I want to say. So I'm not sure what did the Tigers win yesterday?
I don't know. I mean, look, man, you're asking a lot to ask me to pay attention to the 2022 Detroit Tigers at any point past like mid-April. Like once it became clear around like the end of April that this team wasn't going to be any good, that was pretty much the point at which I checked out on Tigers baseball. And nothing that's happened in the 5 months since has made me think that was a mistake.
However, Scott Harris was hired. And Scott Harris, if you read around what people think of him in baseball coming from San Francisco.
Former Giants front office dude.
Very, very different than Al Avila,
yes.
It looks like, which we have said for several years now on this show. This needed
really
to happen.
Long time.
And it happened, and we haven't talked about it. And I wanted to get your perspective. Now that the Tigers shifting gears a little bit here. I mean, 10-3 last 13. Scott Harris been a breath of fresh air in Detroit. I am more interested in what Detroit does this winter with the Scott Harris hire, because I think they could have gone a lot of different ways, and they could have Chicago White Soxed it, and they did not. And I think there is reason for optimism, because like, what have we said? They've drafted well. They have talent. They just don't develop anybody.
No, they've been very bad at talent development, and I think that's
and maybe he
that's
fixes
going to be the biggest
a little
issue.
bit.
Well, I think there are 2 huge issues when it comes to the Tigers going forward. The first is, like you said, talent development. They have struggled badly to turn all of the top picks and prospects they've come up with into useful starting pitchers, and to a certain degree, some of it's unlucky. Casey Mize blowing out his arm is not something you can really plan for or predict. But at the same time, Matt Manning has struggled. Alex Fado has struggled. Spencer Torkelson has struggled. Riley Green has struggled. Like, they have just not been able to unlock whatever it is that or what it is that made these guys top prospects and turn them into regular Major League players. Some of that too is just Major League Baseball is really hard. You get these guys need an appropriate length runway for them to take off. But it just has not happened for the Tigers, and it's not just those top prospects. They really have struggled badly to produce anything in the way of useful players on any level from within. I mean, you look at the guys who are leading this team, or who've led this team in wins above replacement this season. Here is something just that'll make you weep. Javi Baez leads the Tigers in wins above replacement, and he's not even at 3 WAR. Like that alone says so much about what has happened to this team. I mean,
that's really hard to do.
It's really hard to do. I mean, something I forgot to mention, Tariq Skubal in that list of young players, but also he's hurt right now anyway. But you also look at guys like, they've had some mild successes in guys like Eric Haas, or honestly, that might be it. Like that, I was ready to go a little further, but then you look, Jeimer Candelario has simply not turned into a productive hitter. Akil Baddoo, coming off that great rookie season, was more or less buried in AAA and has not figured it out since. Guys like Victor Reyes or Harold Castro or Willie Castro, those look more like reserves or, backup players than they do any kind of potential starter. Like, the guys they have called up from the minors have not really done it. The trades they've made, sending Isaac Paredes out for Austin Meadows has already been a disaster, and that's not even including the fact that Meadows is only under contract for, I believe, another season or 2. They made a lot of mistakes and had a lot of failures in the Al Avila era, and I think by that factor, Harris can't help but be an improvement on that, simply because I think, like you said, he's going to bring a different look to this team that hopefully will be more analytically focused, that'll be better about player development, that'll be better about I imagine there is going to be a wholesale overhaul of this front office over the next few seasons. The flip side, or the other side of it, the other thing that's going to really make a difference as to where the Tigers go is money. And that's something we've talked about with the transfer of ownership from Mike Ilitch to his son, Chris, and how it seems like the younger Illich is really not as interested in the running and maintaining a team the way that the older Illich was.
Which I'm surprised by. The track record with nepotism transitions of power has just been...
It's so sterling. Like, it's bizarre to think that this son, who is in no way, shape, or form qualified to own a Major League Baseball team, but was given one anyway, just is not actually qualified to run a Major League Baseball team the way it should be run. Or maybe
it goes against what we
maybe...
watch on Succession every year. Like, it goes against, which is another just a clean transition of power.
Yeah, or House of the Dragon. I mean, I guess at least the Tigers have less incest happening than that one, but...
Where are the Starks when you need them? The Starks were really the only good transition of power here. Ned understood it. Rob, like it was, and we wiped him out.
We wiped it all out. But that is going to be a part of it too, is how much does Chris Illich want to spend on this roster going forward? If it seems like he's already not particularly interested in running the Detroit Tigers, and certainly doesn't seem like he's interested in running it the same way that Mike Illich did, which is to say, take all of the money, I just want a championship before I die.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to see how Detroit is going to kind of pull itself back up toward the top of any kind, the division, much less the rest of the league, without that combination of good scouting and spending money. Like, you can scout super well and do all the right things in that direction, but you still need to make the moves in free agency that work for you. And it obviously doesn't help that the two major moves the Tigers made in free agency last offseason in Baez and in Eddie Rodriguez really have not panned out for much of anything at all. So I don't really expect to see the Tigers. I think the Tigers will once again be something close to a 90 to 100 loss team next season. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're going to do really anything noteworthy in the offseason. If I'm wrong, I would love to see it. I would like to see, it'd be nice to see that core of talent actually step forward and do what it's supposed to do. But I have to think that the next year or two in Detroit is probably going to be focused on overhauling the front office, overhauling scouting, overhauling player development, like kind of restocking the farm, doing better in that capacity, and trying to figure out if they can build that young core before they then start adding on to it. I think, if anything, what it looks like last offseason was probably premature in that regard, but it also feels like last offseason just wasn't very smartly done on the part of Detroit. They made signings, I think, that people were mostly cautiously optimistic about in Rodriguez and Baez, but certainly didn't work, and then pretty much just stopped there, which I think also doomed them to this place where they needed to go, 10-3 in their last 13 games to avoid a 100-loss season. And it should also be noted before, not to pick on the Tigers necessarily, but like that 10-3 has come against Baltimore, which granted has been a much better team this year, but is going to miss the playoffs and seems to have run out of steam in September. Seem to run out of steam in September going into October. A White Sox team that had nothing left to play for, a Royals team with nothing left to play for, a Twins team that just doesn't have bodies left, and now finishing up with 4 games against Seattle, which at this point is playing purely for positioning in the wild card round, which still counts for something, but obviously they are not facing the best of the best right now. And I feel like I guess it's better than previous Septembers in Detroit where they would go like 3-20 and just completely fall to pieces. But true. I don't know if I necessarily see this as a sign that there's some, and I'm not saying you suggested as such, but I don't see this as a sign of some impending turnaround in Detroit, and I don't really know how much you can take from these last 2 weeks. I think the more important thing is going to be what they do this offseason, who they choose to target, what they end up doing, who they hire. I have to imagine, too, that part of Harris coming on is this is probably the end for A.J. Hinch, too, I would imagine. Another hire that really has just not panned out. It's hard to say exactly. I don't know. I mean, it depends on what the new front office season hinge. But if the expectation was this is a guy who can coach up our young players and bring a championship winning mindset or whatever the particular phrasing is, it's really hard to argue that he's done that. I'm not. I guess there's so much that a manager is judged and based on that we don't see as fans. But at least from what we do see as fans, I'm having a hard time seeing what it is about Hinch that suggests he should come on, he should be brought back. Especially, too, just given the propensity, too, of new front offices to want to bring in a new managerial core that, someone that they can work with, someone that they share a mindset and a vision with, which is not to say Hinch isn't